So picture this. You're getting ready for work in the morning. Your alarm clock has gone off about 16 times. Maybe you've even thrown it against the wall or your phone. Well, you need that, so you got to go get that. You hop in the shower, you rush to get dressed, you feed whoever you have to feed, dogs, spouses, kids, hamsters, whoever needs it. You rush to work and you barely get there in time. You can't relax yet because your heart is just thundering. And then finally you get that moment after the morning meeting where you can sit at your desk and it's just, whew, right? Because rushing around doesn't feel good. And by the way, some of us are more familiar with that feeling than others. We have more details. And for some of us, it's just, when it happens, it just throws off your whole day. So today we're talking about something that we sometimes think of as a deathbed conversion. Somebody who decides kind of at the tail end of their human existence, their time here, that they want to have a relationship with God. And it can feel like this sort of rushed thing, but I feel like it shows us what God can really do with a deadline. I would invite you to think about relationship with God kind of similar to how you think of relationships with each other. There's kind of phases, right? There's that beginning stage where you're first getting to know the person and you take time with them. Maybe you have conflict that you learn to overcome together. And then you have those couples that have been married for 20, 40, 50, 80 years. And they've worked it out. They've got a system. Well, today we're talking about somebody who doesn't have that long trajectory, but it's still a valid place to be, that beginning stage, that seeking stage. There's all different types of spiritual journeys. And the point I want us to take home today, I'm going to tell you the point up front. Isn't that nice? The point I want you to carry with you today is grace works in that moment. Grace covers this whole story. Grace is one of those theological buzzwords I remember from seminary. It felt like this sort of big, amorphous, abstract thing. We would just sort of throw it around. But I want us to sit with it a little bit, explore it, see how it feels. So I want to invite you to do a little exercise with me. We're not going to get up and stretch. We don't need little weights, kind of a spiritual exercise. And for those of you who are like me and you like to know what's coming, what's about to happen, what I'm going to ask you to do is to hold the phrase God's grace in your mind, on your heart, in your awareness. Contemplate it a little bit while you take 3 deep breaths. So for those of you who this feels a little bit too woohoo and you're not feeling it, here is the mental exit ramp. Take a little mental rest, maybe say a little prayer for a minute. For those of you who would like to join, you can close your eyes if you want. You don't have to. Plant your feet wherever you feel steady. If that's on the floor, great. And hold out your hands like this in sort of a receiving posture on your lap. You don't have to hover them in the air like this. I just don't have a lap right now. And take your first deep inward breath, holding the phrase, God's grace, and breathe it out. And take a breath in again, holding the phrase, God's grace, and let it go. And then take another one, deep breath in, God's grace, and then let it go. And welcome back. Wiggle around a little, take another breath. I wonder how that felt for you. Did other words come to mind? Love, forgiveness, peace. Did you get imagery? I learned this. Some people don't get mental pictures, they only get words. And some people are the opposite. They only get mental pictures. Did you hear a hymn? Did you have a melody of a hymn just fill you up? There's lots of them with grace. Did you maybe take a little mental rest? That's also fine. Or maybe it felt a little uncomfortable. That's also fine. The point is to sit with this big idea so it's a little less abstract and amorphous floating over you. Our story today in Luke talks about grace, and I think there are 3 ways that grace comes up in this passage. I love when there are 3 points. It just feels so good, the number 3. First one I want to talk about is grace as a gift. And then I want to talk about how grace is offered and it's not forced. And then grace as it transforms us. So let's think about for a minute grace as a gift. Think about what that means. That means you can't earn it. So there's not a grace punch card. There's not enough points that you can stack up to get it. You can't level up in a video game. You defeat the final boss and you get to the grace level. There's none of that. It's something we haven't earned, and we kind of don't deserve it. And as I was preparing for today, I thought about the culture that you and I are in, American culture, United States. I feel like we put a lot of emphasis and importance on how hard we work, how much we earn, and I think there's a lot of good that comes from that, right? Focusing on, if I put my efforts in and I work hard enough, I can make something of myself. I can change my life. It was not always the case in every country and every culture everywhere else. So that's not a bad thing. But I think what comes with that is sort of this opposite side of that, the other side of the coin. I think, get a little uncomfortable with the idea of anybody getting anything that maybe they haven't quite earned, or that we feel like, I don't know if they deserve all that, even in little ways. So picture this, and I won't have you meditate again. I just like saying picture this. It's Black Friday, because it's about to be, and in this fake scenario, for some reason, you decided to drive to your favorite store on Black Friday, and you're in the madhouse that is the parking lot. If it's me, I'm probably at Target, because I love Target. So you're driving around and you're looking for a spot, and it's just wall to wall, just cars everywhere. And then you see one and you're pulling up and like, oh, no, that's too little. That's a compact spot. I can't fit in there. And then you pull over here and that guy parked kind of funny. So there's no way that you can fit your car between him and the wall. And then you see it. They got that one spot that's kind of off by itself over there. It's wide enough that you can get your butt in there. So you head over that way, and then Mr. Pickup Truck just heads you off and pulls through the spot, by the way. So he was coming from the other way. Pulled right off from the highway. Didn't even have to look. I feel like the feeling is a little different from deep breath God's grace. It's more like, you didn't deserve that. But you didn't even earn it. You didn't even have to work for that. But there's a reason that's so relatable. I think it's such a human reaction to that, isn't it? And the story we're dealing with in Luke today, we have a man, sometimes he's called the repentant thief, repentant criminal, who literally opens with, we don't deserve this. We are actually getting the punishment that we do deserve. And I will admit to you that I wrestle a little bit with this passage. I have a social work background, and my brain loves to generate, but what ifs? Yeah, but what if he stole because he had to feed his family? Yeah, but what if he had nobody there to help him, to teach him, to figure out other decisions to make? Yeah, but what if his life was really hard? I mean, you don't know. And what if he really was someone who had made all these choices and did things that we would consider violent or terrible things? Does that mean that he deserves death on a cross, this sort of capital punishment that we're reading about? Well, the good news is, over all of my what ifs and all the questions that you and I probably also have, grace covers all of it. Because grace is the free thing, the bridge that stands between and builds a way between you and me and God. Grace is the thing that makes relationship with God possible. And it's not actually about us, which is a little hard to swallow. It's not about us. It's not about what we can do or can't do. It's about God reaching out to us. So then I noticed, as he reaches out for Christ and says, hey, remember me, Jesus' answer is just a resounding yes. There's no background check. There's no, well, we can try a probationary period. There's no check your references. There's no hoops to jump through. He just says yes. And in the little bit of time they had, which might have been hours, minutes, in that amount of time, he built as much of a relationship with him as he could. That's what I love about what God can do with a deadline. That's all the time they had. So the second thing I want us to think about is that grace is offered and it's not forced. He doesn't push it on him. So once again, we're about to have the holiday season start, and you and I are about to be advertised to about every 3 seconds. Even your phone is in on it. It's working with them. You're going to get advertisements even from your own phone. I can't tell you the number of times I've been talking to somebody about whatever's going on in their life, and then my Facebook feed will show me a car, which, let's be honest, if y'all know me, I shouldn't be driving anything with my vision the way it is. But I have seen at least 4 Ford Fusions advertised to me because the phone is listening. It's the sales culture. And sometimes as Christians, it can kind of dip over into how we talk about God a little bit. We want to tell people about this so much that sometimes it colors our witness a little bit. I remember when I was in college, first or second year there, I can't remember anymore, I went to a dinner of all the different campus ministries. There's Baptist Student Union, there was Methodist Student Union, there was the Catholic Student Union, there was something, I have no idea. There was everybody. Everybody was there, everybody. So I was sitting there and there was a girl that came up to me and her eyes were wide and she was so excited to tell me about Jesus. And she started with this high-level gold star sales pitch. You need to give your life to Christ. You need to do this. You need to XYZ. And it struck me that I didn't really get a word in edgewise. She was so busy focused on telling me the benefits, the membership benefits, right? That we didn't even get to conversation. And by the time she found out that I was already a Methodist student and a candidate for ministry, she didn't know what to do because she didn't have a sales pitch for I'm a Methodist. But that relationship building stage, that's important, right? It's important to hear what's going on and slow down. In the story in Luke today, we find Jesus kind of at the end of the earthly story. Not the end because there's resurrection, right? But we're about to enter Advent and talk about the beginning, where he first got here. But now we're kind of skipping to season 1, episode 8. This is the very end of it for his time here. And you notice he doesn't argue with the soldiers, with the crowd, with the 2 criminals next to him. And there have been times in his ministry where he does. He's argued with Pharisees. He's gone back and forth with his disciples. He even talked to a woman, which, wow, that's crazy. He can argue. We know he can argue, but he doesn't. And I wonder if it's because the witness is in his actions. He is in a place now where his only focus is to do what he set out to do. He's got to get it done, complete it. And his faith is lived action, not something he can talk about, convince, persuade. He doesn't lecture anybody. It's not his words that convince anyone. It's just what he does, what he lives out. And I think that's where grace lives, in the witness of lived faith. That's how we offer it without forcing it, right? And I think we can see that in really subtle ways too. One of my first internships, I worked with a chaplain at an older adult residential facility. It had all these different levels. So there was independent living, and then there was some assisted living, and then there was memory care unit. It was all different levels. And she was the chaplain for the entire facility, big campus. And I don't remember a single sermon she preached. I'm not even sure I remember the details of any conversation that we had. But I can tell you I remember how she made people feel. She would come alongside them, have conversations with them, sit with them, talk to them, show up at their grandkids' events. She would sit with them in the park when they didn't even know who she was at that point. She would come to their house for dinner, stay late and talk to them after an event. It was what she did that stuck with me. Her witness was in her action. I don't remember a single sales pitch. I don't remember her preaching or trying to convince anyone of the gospel with any of her words, but I remember her faith. I remember her lived faith. And I think that's what we see here with Jesus beside the two. He's alongside them. He's next to both, not just the one who speaks up and says, remember me. It's offered in his lived experience, his faith in action. And now I get to the last thing I want to talk about, and that is how grace can change us from the inside. This story kind of shows up in one of the other Gospels. It shows up in Matthew, not as detailed, and we don't have this sort of amazing conversion story that we're talking about now. All we hear is that the two criminals are mocking Jesus. So if we're assuming that there's consistency in plot, we can assume that this guy who turned to Jesus and said, remember me, maybe started out mocking him too. And then something changed. Something shifted. Somehow grace got in there, in this scene of death and loss. Somehow grace got in. I don't know if it was when Jesus called out to God and just said, forgive them. Or maybe it was this stark contrast that this guy saw between how Jesus lived and responded and the brutality of the crowd and what was happening. Maybe that's what did it. We don't know. And we have to kind of be okay with not knowing. And I think that's difficult, not just in this case, but also for the other guy. Because back to my what if game, I love to know what happened to everybody. I need closure, y'all. I want to know what happened to the other gentleman. Did he have his own moment with God? Did he also get the resounding yes? Did he maybe turn to Jesus and say, clear as though, actually, I think I maybe rethought that. Do you want to remember me too? Or is it kind of too late? Did he have his own moment like that? We don't know. And I think that is a little frustrating. But I think we can leave room for what we know God can do. While I was getting ready for today, I not only read commentaries, I actually also like to read children's sermons, Sunday school sermons. I think it's interesting to see what we're teaching and showing the youngest disciples among us. And some of the lessons were very black and white. They had a very concrete visual where the guy who said to Jesus, remember me, he had an arrow pointing up. And there was a relationship arrow going back and forth between him and Jesus that showed a restored relationship. He's going to paradise. Gentleman over here just had an arrow pointing down. Just down. That's it. Just down. But one of these sermons or these lessons stuck out to me because it didn't do that. It asked the kids to think about, instead, when are we sometimes the person on the left and when are we sometimes the person on the right? It acknowledged that we have the potential to be both at any time, and we don't know what will move us or change us from one to the other. You see, because sometimes we're angry with God, we're frustrated with God, we're in pain, we're suffering, we don't know what in the world is going on. And then sometimes we say, I need Jesus. And we want that relationship to fill our lives. But we never know how grace is going to get in, how it's going to show up, how it's going to move us from one side to the other and transform us. But we do know that we have a God who is kind of in the business of transformation. Sometimes it's little by little, right? There's these stories in the Bible where Jesus calls all of his disciples one by one, and they have all this time to kind of sit with him and follow him and go with him from town to town and see him unfold over time in his ministry. And I think it has this, their faith has this slow build to it. They're with him the whole time. And then there are people who start out in a completely different space. There's a character by the name of Paul or Saul. He's first known as Saul and then Paul. Name change, He started out persecuting early Christians and then had this encounter with God that turned his life upside down and changed how he relates to God. And then he became one of the most prolific writers in the early church. I think the point for you and me is that we don't know when or how that's going to happen, but we can trust the God who knows our hearts and knows our minds and can transform us with grace. So what does this mean for you and me? What can we carry with us from this story? I think that we can learn a little bit about witness, that we don't have to push and force and have the exact right words. Even though we're well-meaning when we do that, we can lose sight of the fact that it's not about you and me, it's a gift. Grace comes from God. Can't come from anywhere else. And it's about relationship with God, building that relationship over time. I think we can learn that grace lives in those moments, those small moments of conversation, of spending time with one another. And then I think we can learn that we never know what will transform someone, whether it's ourselves or someone else. We don't know what is going to move someone. We have to be comfortable with the fact that grace is a little bit of a mystery. It works in the background sometimes, and we don't always see it, but we can see what it does. So take another deep breath in and out. Hold on to God's grace. My hope for you as you enter this week and this season of Advent is just that you begin to notice all the different ways that grace is working in your life to reach out to you and to transform you. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.